Okay, y'all, I want to talk to you about conversations. Conversations are obviously important because every day, every moment of our lives, won and lost, built one conversation at a time. And we don't often see the structure of conversations. They're important. Once you can see the structure of conversations and the operating system behind them, you can start to break them down, put them back together, reboot them, and operate them in them more intelligently and freely. So a conversation really starts with an invitation across some sort of an invitation, an interface. And that invitation can be, hey, how's it going? We need to talk. We all know that the worst text message in the world to get is a we need to talk and nothing else. So when your invitations are invitational and they cross that interface, maybe it's air, maybe it's the internet, a person on the other side receives that invitation and they will absorb it. And what they come back with is they'll take a turn, right? They'll take a turn across that interface. And if you're lucky, over time, a certain thread of conversation will develop, and it'll have a certain natural cadence. Those are some of the fundamental components of a conversation, and this all comes out of cybernetic theory and conversation design theory. And so if we're to take these pieces of a conversation and to break them down, as I tried to design group conversations and organizational conversations and community conversations, and through the interviews that I've been doing over the last couple of years on the podcast, I began to try and design a really simple way to look at all of that theoretical structure and focus on what's the most important. And that is for sure the invitation. If the invitation isn't right, the whole thing falls apart. And that's basically because of an idea from open space, which is that the law of 2 feet. Everyone has 2 feet and they are free. If they may not always realize it, but it's a choice. And you have to be able to invite people in because nobody has to be there. And so surrounding that invitation are the fundamental components of the conversation that we just talked about. And so that is turn-taking, right? How we manage turn-taking. This is something that can really change group conversations for the better, just being mindful of turn-taking. That awareness and manipulation, if you will, of cadence. One of the reasons why cadence is so powerful, if you think about the Google Design Sprint or a day-long workshop, they contain the conversation and they push a cadence that is faster than comfortable, but can move the conversation forward in a really powerful way. The other thing structures like that do is they thread conversations together into an intelligible format. They have a narrative structure. So design thinking is a great way of threading conversations. Project managers thread conversations, and they manage an appropriate cadence of work. And one thing I didn't talk about in the other diagram is this idea of error and repair. So what do we do when something goes wrong, and how do we fix it? And this is the ability to say you're sorry and to smooth things over and to get back on track and use these other components to move things forward. One thing I've really realized is that if you don't start early with clear and shared goals, if you break one of these, it's hard to know what to go back to. There's no North Star. The other thing that is really surprisingly easy to affect when you're changing a conversation or trying to reboot your conversation OS of a situation is to change the people. Do you have to deal with these people? Can you change the players? If you change the players, you will change the game. And one of the other things on the outside that's also really, really interesting and easy to affect is the interface. And we've seen this all over and over again in our lives. If we are stuck in a conversation, it might be because we're on email and we switch to a phone and then it's going to work better. I've also seen this in my own work where some people want to be on Asana and other people just want to be on a Google spreadsheet. The interface for the conversation changes the conversation. Some of the interviews I've been doing for this book I've done on Mural, which is a whiteboard on the internet, and it makes a interesting and powerful interface for a conversation. And speaking of power, the last piece of how to reboot your conversation operating system is how you handle power and gender. Power and gender manipulate and affect and deform conversations in really interesting ways. And how you deal with each one of these 9 elements determines how you structure your conversations, how you approach each interaction. And it doesn't matter if it's one-on-one or if it's with a team of people, or in the conversation you have with yourself, or with a community of people, which I'll talk more about later. But all of the conversations that you can have can be affected by changing some or all, or even just one of these components of the conversation operating system.